First, let me get this out of the way. This is an expensive lens, and I've always felt a sense of pride in using cheap stuff, broken stuff held together by tape, or things cobbled together out of whatever happens to be lying around, even though I could have maybe potentially afforded something newer, better, prettier at various times in my life. I mean, I can't right now, but at times I could have. The notion of solving a problem by throwing money at it has always been a bit gross to me. And I feel shame parading around with the latest, most expensive stuff. This is why I've become such a huge proponent of buying old, used DSLRs the last handful of years. If only that option existed when I was starting out, that would have changed everything for me. But I'm not bitter. I'm grateful. I mean, everything else in the modern world sucks, but as far as camera selection goes, this is an amazing time to be alive. Before I get too far, I should clarify that I use a cheap ND filter on my RF 50mm 1.2 because otherwise it would be difficult to shoot at 1.2 in the sunlight. However, it also gives me some pretty wacky lens flare that I really like. So when you see, like there it is right there, when you see that circular lens flare, just know that that's the ND filter, not the lens. But I will take it off at some point, just so I can illustrate the difference. And I do always try to remember to take it off before shooting portraits or something paid, though sometimes I forget, because it's not so great for portraits. But just my walk around, shoot whatever I please lens, I kind of like it. I feel like it adds something. So you take that tendency, oh mine, you couple it with the fact that the cheapest version of whatever prime lens that you might want to buy, and the most expensive version of that same focal length prime, the images they produce are not really all that different. I mean, they're different, and of course the expensive one is going to be better. But the cheap lens gets you like 85% of the way there, I would say. And given that it's always been hard for me to justify buying the $1,000 plus lens US when the $100 plus lens will do just fine. I've mostly only ever shot on cheap primes. I'd spring for the expensive zoom more often than not, but I'd go for the cheap prime. But sure, I like the widest aperture I can get for reasons of good low light performance, for reasons of softer portraits with better subject isolation. But is 1.8 not good enough? Or 1.4? Does it have to be 1.2, 1.0, 0. Whatever? Well, for me, 1.8 is fine. It's good enough. It's just fine. There's nothing really I can do with a 1.2 lens that I can't also do with a 1.8. I realize, though, shallower and shallower depth of field becomes an obsession for some. And I get it. Like, I have no problem with that. Every photographer becomes obsessed with something and chases that thing. And that breeds variety, keeps the world interesting. For me, it's light. That's what I chase. But no, I'm not obsessed with having the widest possible aperture. But that doesn't mean I don't like it, that I wouldn't choose it if they cost the same. I absolutely do prefer it. It's just not that big of a deal to me. What I mean is, at the time, I considered it to be a bonus of buying this Canon RF 50mm 1.2L. I was not chasing the 1.2. So, I think it was a year, maybe two after it was first released, that I shelled out the required $2,300 US. And okay, it happened rather quickly, and the feeling has only intensified over the years. It is my favorite lens that I have ever used, period. Okay, yeah, of course I like it. It's a premium, expensive lens. What's not to like? A fair question, but here's a better question. Why did I buy it in the first place? Doesn't really seem like something I would do. Well, part of that was because I was kind of just going along with the whole transition to mirrorless at this point. I was fully on board. I really liked where camera tech was headed. I didn't realize that I'd come to miss the more traditional, clunkier manual imperfect nature of DSLRs. That feeling just had not hit me yet. I was still excited for the new stuff, but it was something more specific than that, actually. It was because of one particular wedding. For whatever reason, everything I encountered that day just highlighted all the flaws of the 50mm lens I was using. So much chromatic aberration that I had to try to edit out in post. A lot of focusing issues that day too. Shallow depth of field, yes, but kind of cheap looking in the out of focus areas. Too busy, too much detail. Especially ugly in the poor corner to corner sharpness of the lens. These were problems that crept up sometimes, but not usually with this frequency and this severity. It was just that lens plus that location plus those specific lighting conditions on that specific day did not play well together. I left the wedding feeling like it went okay, but I was so profoundly disappointed when I saw the results. Really ruined the vibe of the photos as a whole to me. Granted, non-photographers would probably find all that imperfection artistic. Me too, actually, in the right circumstance. Rarely in my life have I ever felt so held back by gear, though, as I did in that moment. And I felt it wasn't fair to ever risk a paying client's photos that way ever again, just because of my philosophy of using cheap gear, cheap primes. And then I happened to see some photos shortly thereafter shot with the Canon EF 50mm 1.2L. I was using the Canon EF 50mm 1.4. And big difference. I lost my innocence or something that day. Now it's worth noting I still use that very same EF 50mm 1.4 today, frequently actually, with my EF bodies. It's not a bad lens or anything like that, but I stopped using it at paid gigs. So I purchased the Canon EF 50mm 1.2L because while still crazy expensive at $1,400 US, it was still nearly $1,000 less than the RF 50mm 1.2. Well, long story short, sure, it's a good lens, it's a beautiful lens in fact, but it still suffers from all the problems I mentioned that the 1.4 lens suffers from. Just less so and in a more aesthetically pleasing sort of way, but given the huge price tag at the time, I didn't feel like it was enough of an upgrade. The still poor corner-to-corner sharpness really bummed me out with the EF 1.2. But they say this RF 50mm 1.2 is clinically perfect, too perfect, which I disagree with. But at the time that sounded like exactly what I was after. So I returned the EF 1.2L and I got this RF 1.2L. I was blown away by it immediately. Did not find it to be clinically perfect at all. I found it to be absolutely gorgeous. I don't think I ever once felt it appropriate to describe a full frame image as having the medium format look, but that's exactly how I think of this lens. I may not go around saying it because it sounds kind of dumb, but that's what I'm thinking. To me, this lens is magical. Truly. This is a cliche, but really, it feels like cheating. You know that technique where you take multiple images with shallow depth of field and stitch them together? Yeah, that's kind of what this lens looks like to me, only you're not taking multiple images and you're not stitching them together. For images where you're very close to your subject, doesn't really matter all that much for stuff like that. 1.2, 1.4, 1.8, cheap, expensive, DSLR, mirrorless, all of that's going to look pretty similar. But where this lens really distinguishes itself is when you're shooting wide open at a distance. Okay, so here I'm just doing with the filter and without the filter to illustrate the difference. I'm also going to ditch the filter from here on out. It's going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass for me, but I'll deal with it. And what still blows me away about this lens, even after all these years of owning it, is how you can walk around shooting everything wide open, no matter the distance from camera. And where you place your focus, be it in the middle or way off to the side, it's always beautifully sharp. Not overly sharp, but beautifully, perfectly sharp. And you can still get subject-background separation even for subjects at a distance. Maybe the background won't melt into goo when you're standing at a distance, but it will be just soft enough to communicate the idea of depth, and I just find that so valuable. Shooting wide open, to me at least, is not just about getting shallow depth of field. I find that's where every lens shows you its full personality. The more you stop down, the more you're eliminating the character of that lens. Whatever qualities are, its very identity. And yes, I realize the internal contradiction of this, that I replaced the 50 I had before because of these same types of imperfections. Oh well, contradictions are fine in art. That's the one area in life where it's not harmful to simply trust your gut and ignore the data. Also, the imperfections of this lens are minor. It does have a pretty heavy vignette, easy to correct out, a little bit of distortion. And then of course I add that ND filter, that cheap, non-variable ND filter that kind of gives me some erratic lens flare that I like, not in all situations, but I like it. Plus it helps me shoot wide open all the time. Blocks just enough light for me. Though I don't actually shoot wide open all the time. Just a lot of the time. Many cheap prime lenses, though, you just can't walk around shooting wide open. They're too imperfect. They're too unpredictable. Might work out for one shot, but then the next 5 are going to look horrible. Close up you can, but not at a distance. We've covered this. The farther back you are, the greater the need to stop down. That's my experience anyway. It's kind of annoying, actually, as someone who shoots in manual. I'm doing a lot of extra work on those dials as I get closer and farther away from my subjects. And that's, I think, what I love most about this RF 50mm lens. What I'm talking about when I say medium format look. Wide shots with a subtle but noticeable shallow depth of field. I love that look. I've owned plenty of gear that impressed me at first, then faded into the background. Things I ended up not using as much as I expected to. Excitement wears off. People just get used to stuff. And then that's the new standard, and you kind of forget the amazingness of what you have. And so sadly, given enough time, something might start out as a magic wand, but eventually just becomes a screwdriver. But this one never settled into that category for me. Every time I mount it, I'm completely struck by the feeling that I should not have access to something this incredible, a mere mortal such as myself. My love for this lens has only deepened over time. But reflecting on what could have been, I think about that EF 1.2L. Would be awesome to have that, because then I could use it with all my DSLRs, film bodies. It's much more limiting in that sense to own the RF version. So I was just curious, and I went back and I looked at some of the stuff that I shot for the week or however long I had the 1.2 EF lens. So I shot this, 5-6 years ago, something like that. It's very much in line with what I'm doing today, which is interesting. But there's something unpleasant about the out of focus areas. Just a little bit too much detail. Understand I'm nitpicking. It doesn't look that bad. I'm just saying it does not shoot like a $1,400 lens, more like a $400 lens, which is fine. I just don't want to spend $1,400 for a $400 lens, and so I'm feeling extremely justified. Really glad I made the call I did at the time. Yet none of these shots of my cat are acceptably sharp when you zoom in. Oof. This is the sharpest one I got, and it's still just a little bit hazy. Just not good enough. Not for $1,400. Here's me today photographing my cat with the RF 1.2. See, this lens is not clinically sharp. This lens is gorgeous. It's soft in the right places, and it's sharp in the right places. Yes, it costs a fortune, but you can actually see where that money's going when you look at the images, I feel. Not so much with the other one. I actually did way more extensive testing with the EF 1.2. I just don't want to get so super sidetracked. But the thing I hated the most about it was the poor corner-to-corner sharpness, where you'd get a face in pretty good focus, but the hands would be smeary, like you were shooting through a Coke bottle. Hated that. Might be cool just for my own art projects, but just not great as a practical lens with which to photograph paying clients. But whatever can or has been said about this lens, however it compares to other lenses, whatever specs it has, whatever engineering decisions went into it, whatever it could have been but wasn't, however clinically sharp it is or isn't, that time is long over. The cake has been baked. Do I like the cake? I certainly do like the cake. Is the cake worth $2,300 US? Yes, unequivocally yes. Looks like it sells for $2,500 now. Bummer. Well, get it used then. But here's where things get tricky. Could I justify this purchase today? Would I buy this lens again today in my present situation? No, I wouldn't. My financial situation is a mess. Also, I'm not really shooting weddings anymore. I mean, I think I'd like to change that someday, just not today. But if my financial situation were better, sure, I'd buy it. But okay, it's out of my price range today, so what would I buy instead if I needed a 50? Easy choice, actually. The Sigma Art 50mm 1.4. It's an astonishing lens for a fraction of the price. Is it as good? I mean, I'd say no. It's great, really, really good, but it doesn't quite have the same magic. But I really liked it. Anyway, 50mm is my favorite focal length. And the Canon RF 50mm 1.2 is my favorite 50mm lens of all time. Yes, it's worth the money. It's really, really expensive, so you have to have the money. But you will be getting your money's worth out of it. I've had to sell some gear recently to pay some bills. Sucked, but it's alright. But if I had to sell this lens, that would be kind of devastating. I'm not sure I could bounce back from that.